Welcome to TheatreCast, presented by the EdReach Network, giving educators a voice, a big voice. You've reached episode number 54, being recorded May 4th, 2014. This is a show where theater teachers and professionals share their passion for theater trends, share practical advice and tips, and ask questions of some of theater's most innovative collaborators. I'm one of your hosts, Nick Cusumano, and joining me is my partner in crime and fellow Kevin Spacey admirer, Danielle Filas.
Greetings, everybody.
If you are a regular listener, you know that both Danielle and I have a great admiration for Mr. Spacey and what he has done for the arts and theater in general, and of course keeping us on the edge of our seats with House of Cards and all things Shakespeare and so much more. Earlier this year, he had announced that he was releasing a movie called Now in the Wings. Let me make sure that I say this correctly. Now in the Wings on a World Stage, which is about the bridge project that he did with Sam Mendes, who was also the director of American Beauty, where their collaboration kind of first started. And it took Richard III all around the world, which Danielle and I are offering to join the next bridge project to sign us up. I can be Spirit Carrier number 12. I'm okay with that.
I guess I could find it in myself to give of my time if Mr. Spacey said. I was thinking about it, just probably what separates me from being a stalker would be my laziness and lack of ambition. Otherwise, he'd probably be frightened of me. But don't worry, Mr. Spacey, I'm too chill for that. Also married, so sorry, off the market, pal. But we did watch the movie. It just came out, and I'm excited to talk about it.
May 2nd, which I think it's just one that I love that it's dealing with a Shakespearean show, because you have those big themes that appear in Shakespeare shows, and I think, as we've discussed recently, I mean, Shakespeare always seems to deal with love or power and a little bit of both. And, you know, Richard III, this man wants power and he wants it now. And he'll do whatever he can, whatever he needs to get that power, no matter what the cost. And I think that's definitely something that shows through the production and those choices. One of the things they had touched on, and we kind of see it in the, you can see in some of the images from the show that are out there, is the Muammar Gaddafi look, and I think that appears more in the later half of the show, when he's just kind of really, Richard III starts losing it and you know, struggling to hold on to power and realizing the costs of what it was, and that he had that look, and it's right during the time when they were touring during the Arab Spring, and they have that real world effect and that real world things happening at the same time, and kind of how they coincided with that just by happenstance.
And I think they show that when they're doing the show in Qatar, in Doha, Qatar, that's going on. And one of the things I really liked that Mr. Spacey and the rest of the cast talked about is how that so much of the play is Richard at his best when he's seeking that power, and how he kind of can't believe it's working. And nobody could play that better than Kevin Spacey. That moment of, was ever a woman in this way wooed? was ever a woman, and like he can't believe it's working. And so he's really at his best and his most charming while he's doing that. And that moment he puts the crown on his head, that it's gone, and he becomes corrupted by power, or he has nothing left to strive for except to keep that which it is he has. And then becomes his descent. It is, we did it here. Actually, 3 companies here in Columbus did Richard III at the same time. A company called Bread and Circus Theater, which I'm not sure is still around now, but this was a couple of years ago. Rosebriar Shakespeare, which I was working with, so I got to work with that company, and one of my favorites here in Columbus, Available Light, all doing it at the same time by accident, announced their seasons and went, oh, oops. But it was kind of cool. They sort of overlapped, so you actually could go see all 3. And the Rosebriar one, great director here in town, Steve Emerson, directed that, and it was a comedy. It was straight up a very dark comedy. He did it with Richard III. The deformity was expressed as him being part puppet. And there were other puppets in it. It wasn't like Avenue Q, don't think that. It was a little darker, although there were some kind of Avenue Q, like the kids were. But it was crazy. He really played with the comedy, so I was really glad to hear Spacey talk about that, Mr. Spacey saying that so people are always surprised at how funny it is and how charming Richard III is, and I think you have to make him that way if you're going to do a production of it. You've got to make the audience buy into and enjoy his maliciousness and his sort of surprising rise to power. Then when he gets it, see what it does to him, and he becomes more deformed, sort of in his soul, once he gets that crown on his head. So, sorry, spoiler alert if you haven't read it. But I have to say, you know, I was disappointed a little bit. I was a little worried when the movie started out, the first 10 minutes. I'm like, oh, no, it's just going to be like, oh, my God, it was so fun to tour with Kevin Spacey. And don't get me wrong, it kind of is that, but it's a lot more. And I was happy after the 11-minute mark. I was like, okay, good. This is going to have some more interesting insights than just that. But one of the things I missed was one of the things they said in I think the New York Times review, which wasn't very positive, though I liked the movie, was that they go to all these different countries and they talk about how all the audiences react, but you never get to talk to the audience. I would have loved to have known how somebody in Qatar read that Muammar Gaddafi costuming choice and seeing somebody have a meteoric rise to power and total control in a sort of dictatorship, tyrannical dictatorship that Richard III has. I'd love to see what they made of that.
I think that would, I of course wanted to see, and I hope they filmed it, and I hope they release it at some time, is a full recording of the production, since we were not able to get tickets for it.
Yeah.
I would love to see it, because by watching all the, we saw 19 to 24 cast members, we saw snippets of their work, but I'd love to watch some of those scenes that they were in and get a sense of who they were on stage.
Yeah, it definitely makes you want more of that. Maybe they didn't talk to the audiences because they wanted you to have that sort of view that you do have as an actor and as a crew member. All you hear is the audience en masse reacting. You don't usually get to go out and talk, especially on tour. Like, it's different when you're playing in your home theater and your friends and family come see it. You get some feedback. You get to read the critiques of it from the critics, but that's different than going on tour and you don't get to hear what the audience is saying.
And I mean, a part of the tour, they use, or anytime the native language was in English, then they use super titles. So that's a whole nother interesting experience.
Layer, yeah. They
Um,
did it in China. I would love to know what the first of all, what the conversation was like when they said, "Sure, we'll let you come in and do this play." Kind of surprising, but then also I'd love to hear what people thought of it afterward.
yeah,
So when you
maybe
make
that's
the
on
sequel, Mr. Spacey,
the.
I'd be happy to go carry the mic and interview if you can't find a place for me on your stage.
One thing I found really interesting, and I'm sure it did help gel the like cast together, but I know it's also it's I'm sure it costs more money to do that, but I thought it was really interesting that the whole cast was there the whole rehearsal process, um, which is such great luxury, especially dealing with such a um, great text like Richard III, that you can, because I think they gained insights, and I loved how they said, they built that um, by taking time to build that community, that ensemble together, that whatever they did, it wasn't wrong. They just were able to explore and see what worked and see how it developed. And, I think it was Lady Anne saying something about one of the notes that Sam Mendes had given her, and the way the rehearsal process worked, she was like, "Oh, I totally understand." And having other people there helped me understand, one, that I wasn't alone in this process, that we're all working on this together, and we all have a part to play to tell this story. So I thought that was really an interesting way to work, and sometimes I wish we could afford that luxury, um, especially dealing with such great work as Shakespeare. Um, and so I just found that I was like, that'd be really neat to do
And
sometime.
table work. I mean, so few people, so few companies have the, as you say, luxury of time or resources to devote to sitting down and doing table work. And it was clear they did do their table work. And that's as much a part of rehearsing a complex piece, like any Shakespearean piece is. Um, to have that luxury, I wish more
And
folks did.
to be, I mean, it's hard to tour something like, I mean, to tour something that big. I mean, the last ones that, I think Gemma Jones, who was in it, she was part of Peter Brook's Midsummer Night's
Midsummer.
Dream that went all across the world. And I think he also did that with the sorry, let me see if I can say this correctly, the Mahabharata, um, who I think Helen Moon might have been part of one or both of those two. Um, and that, that touring process, because I think, that's something we don't face all the time as theater artists. Sometimes we do. I mean, if you're working professionally, that's something you may do. I've never toured with the show, but Danielle has many years
Yeah,
has experience with.
it brought back memories of that for me for sure. I spent about a year, but it wasn't. It was kind of like theirs, where we would go on a tour of one chunk, and then we'd come back and play our home theater, and then we'd go on another chunk and come back and play our home theater, and very similar to I recognize the sort of elation, excitement. We're seeing these new places, different audiences react differently, and then just that how I remember listening one time, like conked out in the back of the van with my feet up on the window, and was listening to my CD Sony Walkman. That'll tell you how long ago that was. And Simon and Garfunkel, I think, yeah, Homeward Bound came on, and I'm just crying like a baby because I just missed home. I missed not living out of a drawer, and gosh, it's a tough. it's a tough life. However, if I'd gone with Kevin Spacey, I got to go on a yacht and, as you said, drive a Mercedes over sand dunes and be fed well in Italy, although it's hard to go through Italy and not be fed well. Maybe I would have gotten over that teary moment a little bit better, but boy, you do really miss home and stability and things that are familiar. I loved the actor who said it was so nice to come back to the States, even though it was great to go over all of the world. And he said, because things work. And do I want to have Wi-Fi as I sit down and have my Starbucks? Yes, I do. And I recognize that too, like the sort of exotic thrill of being in some new place is really great, but sometimes it's nice to come back to your vanilla existence where things are familiar.
I really enjoyed the, I think they gave us a little bit of a sense of the process of touring with a show that big. I loved the visual aspects of the show. It was just so striking and pulled you in, but that's not an easy set to build. Like they said when they were in Italy, they had to take that down and around, all the way down, underneath, up a stair, down and around, through, and they had to take that.
When that Greek amphitheater, and they had to reimagine it completely.
And the Greek amphitheater one. And I love that they started with that because, this is with, theater as we know it started there. So what does that look like? And to do something that awesome and what they said, they had 14,000 people each night. Just the looks of it, and and I love that Lady Anne had her I'm sure iPod or MP3 player or whatever she was off on the sides and just looking off of those people, and just the mix of the modern and the ancient together. It was kind of awe-inspiring.
It was Epidaurus, right? I think that's where they were.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be incredible. Smart tour manager to start him out there. Really smart. And a lot of the film seems to be, I was surprised. I thought more of it would be about the process of building character and the show itself. And if you want that, I would recommend supplementing this film with the Al Pacino film Looking for Richard, which spends a lot more time with the character development and how to act Shakespeare. This one really isn't about that. That doesn't seem to be the main focus of Kevin Spacey's film. I felt like it was kind of a love letter to theater. More than anything.
Well, and I think that's kind of an interesting thing, because think of the people who may be fans of House of Cards who all of a sudden, they have their Netflix account and they're like, oh, this is a really interesting show and it has so many Shakespearean elements and I'm going to throw that
and Richard III.
Yeah. And Iago, and I listened to, I found, and I'll put it in the notes, but I was reading on Google Plus or something, a Shakespearean scholar showing all the different Shakespearean references in House of Cards, because you kind of have that Iago type part a lot with Frank, but
Lady M.
Definitely Lady M. And all those different references, and it's only a 10-minute thing, which is, so I'll put that in our show notes. That it's really interesting how that kind of mixes together. But so they may be familiar with Kevin Spacey's film work, and of course work on new media or what TV. I don't know what you want to call House of Cards. Awesome, but besides that, to see how much the theater matters to him, that it's continually been a place he always goes back to. And to be, he's been running a theater company for 10 years at the Old Vic, which I can say I've actually seen the show in. Unfortunately, it was before Mr. Spacey took over. I saw a show called 900 Aniata. It had John Cryer in it. It was like Tennessee Williams on crack. Talk about, and for some reason, whoever it was with was like, "Can we stay for notes?" Because they must have been in previews. And talk about, it was definitely a mix of American and British actors, and the guy who wrote it was, I think, on his own plane. That was definitely interesting to watch the body language during notes. And so then I got to leave through the back of the theater because I had locked the front part, but I was like, oh, I've been to the Old Vic. And the Old Vic used to be home to the Royal National Theatre for a long time also. I was like, I know that space. All of a sudden I realized, oh, that's where I saw that 900 on the Apta show.
That's, go ahead, I'm sorry.
And just that commitment to the theater and performing on stage, because I think that, that's kind of where I got to start. I think Shakespeare's been something that's been a part of his life for a long time.
Although he said, when he said there's a mix of American and British actors, which I want to talk more about.
Yes.
Because there's a mix of American and British actors and people who have lots of experience with Shakespeare and people with not so much experience with Shakespeare. He raises his hand. So I got from that he doesn't feel like he's a fan of Shakespeare, but he doesn't feel like he's as learned in the ways of the bard, I guess, as especially some of the actors around him. Well, some of them have been doing it for 40 years.
He may be was not a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company, but I think part of that's him being humble. I know because of like the documentary that, talk about still having commitment to arts. He was one of the producers of the Shakespeare High documentary about the Shakespeare drama contest held in California every year. And I believe he went to Chatworth High School and appeared in that. He showed that as part of, if you ever need reasoning why the art's important, he did a speech for Americans for the Arts, and it showed a little preview of Shakespeare High in there. So it's not, it's something that maybe he doesn't do every day, but it's definitely something.
I'd love to know how many roles. I should have looked how many roles he's had, because Richard III, that's no newbie role. That's a pretty, as one of the more intense roles physically and otherwise. But they talk a lot in this film of his about the American and British actors, the mix of American and British and Nigerian actors. And I, boy, that's got to be tough to be an American actor and walk into that, because I know there's definitely a stigma to American actors doing Shakespeare, especially in Britain. But I loved that some of the British actors, the English actors, said there's a sense that we're born with it, born into it. I don't think that's it. I think the reason British actors tend to more readily adapt Shakespeare is because of that time thing. Here, the only theater you're going to do for the greater part of your life as an actor, unless you're in that tiny percentage, even if you're in that tiny percentage that becomes a professional actor like Mr. Spacey, most of your rehearsal schedules are going to be 5 weeks of rehearsal. Across the pond, where you have some subsidized theater, you're getting paid for rehearsal, and you've got much more rehearsal time. And I think that that's one of the reasons we often don't do it justice over here. But I thought the Americans held their own just fine.
Yeah, well, and I think part of the casting is he and the casting that they pulled in a really diverse group. Because you had, and I think even some of the actors were Scottish and some might have been Irish, and then my the American actress, and I totally who played his mother, and the name. I found she appeared a little bit more towards the end of it, and just talking about her experience, and she just had a regalness about her, which was just interesting, and of course that comes into great casting, but and Lady Anne, she just had such an interesting look. I mean, she has to play such a dichotomy, those opposites. All of a sudden, she's, has to switch on stage all of a sudden.
I loved her take on that. Not to start as a simpering, whining, mewling weakling, but to start off with that passion of anger. It makes more sense that could switch to passion of the loin variety rather quickly, especially if you've got Kevin Spacey standing over you. Just saying. I loved, who was the actor who said that I related to this so much, because most of the roles I get that I really wanted, I have this reaction. She said, there's a sense when you get the casting call that you got it, of yay, I got it. And then she said it immediately afterward, you think, oh, and she said the F word. F word, now I have to do it.
Yeah.
I imagine that would be multiplied if you're also having to do it for Kevin Spacey's company across the world. That's a lot of pressure. But if they believe in you, I think that helps a lot. There was that underpinning too of the conflict, I think, will hit home for so many artists, of the conflict of family versus artistry, and how, especially if the person you're spending your life with is not an artist, not a theater artist, how tough it is. There is a sense that families don't get it sometimes, or that there's a almost sadness in the fact that I love this theater thing, and part of my life is that I'm going to be gone for months at a time doing it.
Mm-hmm. But I think they captured, and I'm sure you can attest to, the struggles and the surprises and the roller coaster that touring does, and I can kind of totally relate, because you're going halfway across the world, and all of a sudden your timing's off, and then they're like, they were doing construction in China from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., which is when we need our rest, and what are you going to do, and how do you deal with that?
And even if you don't tour, stuff like that happens. Everybody's sick, right? Every actor has that show where everybody was sick, and you still had to do the show. And I
thought it was interesting they touched on it, where, okay, I'm at where I'm at with the show, and here we go.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, that's just the straight up truth about theater is, you have to do the show no matter what mood you're in, and here's where I'm at with it right now, and this is what I'm going to do, and that's that.
And my ensemble is tight enough that they're here to catch me. And I love the little bit they were talking about. There was a segment where they talk about the mistakes. Because when you do a show for a long run, I have never done a 198 show run. Not many of us have. But even a 15 show run or a 20 show run can feel like a long run, and you start to notice the mistakes. Like, those are what you talk about. Like, oh, that was funny when you dropped that, and did you see what I did? Yeah, it was great. Thanks for picking that up. Or, oh my God, did you hear what he said? What was that? It sounded like he was burping. And backstage, the show gets like boring for you, and then it's all of the anomalies that you start to sort of take note of and then take joy in as an actor when it's a long run like that. It's so fun.
And I talked about, I guess the term is corpsing.
Yeah. I'm stealing that. I've never heard that term.
No, maybe it's a British term.
Yeah, well, I've taken it.
And it was definitely interesting just how they would kind of catch little moments of them throwing each other off, which, I can see that happening. And how do you work your way through that, and what does the audience think, and all that type of stuff. It's definitely showed a little bit of, that theater is a living thing, and things happen all the time, and what shows your strength is how you adapt to it.
I kept trying to figure out as I was watching. I found myself trying to find sort of the spine, or the if you were going to do the elevator talk of this show, like what's it about? What's the point, I guess, of it? And for me, I think that moment comes, and it's dovetailing off of what you just said, Nick. That moment comes when the actor, and I can't remember which, our Ohio friend, who we both really liked, who, I can't remember, it might have been him, but talking about the sand paintings. And as the film had been going, I'd been thinking of the Buddhist sand paintings where they take so much time to do the sand painting, the mandala, and then just wipe it away. And they beautifully, I think, edit this. The editing was gorgeous in this part. Edit it together with the striking of a set. And that you come together and work so hard to make something you hope is beautiful, with the understanding that it's ethereal and temporary and transient, just like life. One of the things we talk about in yoga class all the time is the only constant is change. And that, to me, that was, I thought, okay, that's what this is about. Maybe that's why they don't show the whole show, because you can't really capture it. Can't really capture live theater on film. It's just not the same.
No, but I'd be okay with.
I would too.
With a slight carbon copy, I'd be okay.
I would too.
I mean, just visually,
yeah.
The sections we saw. I mean, just the projections and just that use of, the different portraits as Kevin Spacey as Richard III, and then the kind of titling of the characters that were coming in, and then the lighting. I mean, it just looked so visually appealing.
And the sound, the drums.
And the drums, which I think that was kind of cool. And I think, and it's one of those things that you, when you're in a longer run, that you develop rituals to get you into the mode of doing the show, if that makes sense. Either how you prep.
Oh, yeah.
Or, as you come into space, of course, if you're doing any fight choreography, you should run through that every night. Or the drumming in each of the spaces to see how the sound. But what a great way to, it keeps that connective tissue working, so that you can center yourself and your group as you approach it in a new space. And I think it'd be interesting to see how space affected the show, or the run of the show. Because, I mean, we got little snippets of it, but, because that definitely was a diverse space. It's not like you're doing a one-truck place. I mean, these weren't roadhouses per se that they performed in.
All very different, and that's one of the fun things about touring. And even Rosebriar, we did a production of King Lear, and we had a couple of spaces that hired us to come do it there. And our home space was pretty much proscenium, pretty much a sort of raw, basic proscenium. and then we went on our first tour gig, and it was in the round, and it was there were people. It was at this castle here in Ohio, and it was in the space with people who were sitting and eating, right? So all of a sudden, we had maybe an hour. We got there. I looked around and went, things are really going to have to change. And some of the actors were super freaked out about it. Most notably the ones who had to do sword fights, which I think is pretty reasonable to be a little freaked out, but they ran them, but you couldn't possibly go through in your head all the changes you'd have to do prior to it. You just had to kind of discover it when we were up there. I loved it. I loved it. I think that improv background, it just fired me up to find all kinds of new things. All the asides to the audiences were so much easier because you could just sit down at a table and grab someone's drink and say it. It was so much more fun and alive. And as the actors started to play, it got really fun. So there's a lot of fun stuff about touring and not being in your own place. It would have been fun, I think, Nick, you're right, to see more of almost like more of what the crew had to go through to walk in and figure it out.
They were definitely the unsung heroes in this production.
Yeah.
We got to see I think we saw the deputy stage manager.
Yeah,
and we saw snippets of them, but
So mostly of them sitting in a booth going, having been a stage manager, I'm like, I know that look too. I know that look for sure. Well, and just walking in and seeing like a new lighting board.
Yeah.
I remember that was Second City. I would go from one place that had a lighting board that was a computer lighting board where everything was preset. All I had to do was hit go. It was a monkey board, just push, 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 and I was done. And then one time we're in this old space that used to be a church, and it was weird dials that looked like they were from 1937 or something on the walls that I had to figure out, okay, I guess this is going to be different. But I'm sure they had that too, and with so much more at stake. I mean, projections. Having to figure out projections in new spaces, that's yeah. I would like to have seen more of that too.
Yeah, I mean, we just kind of touched on it a little bit, and so if any of them ever watch this, thank you so much for all your hard work because it did show on the stage.
Yeah, and the humble quality to him, I think, is just. I mean, the credits are in alphabetical order. He doesn't come as the first one. He doesn't come as it's in alpha order, which to me, I sat and watched the credits and thought, see, that's legit. Thank you, Kevin Spacey. And it might be a choice. Like somebody I was talking to today said, oh, he just did that so he'd seem humble. I was like, so? I mean, how is that different than humble?
Well, I think that just showed the commitment from what we saw on the screen that they were an ensemble, and what better way is let's just put it alphabetically because that then it's not about billing. It's we're a group together. Okay, alphabetically makes logical sense. Let's go with that. And but I do appreciate and. Helps me as a theater artist to know that someone's out there pushing on a bigger stage than I am, because it makes it worth it for me to go that I have someone who's got my back up there with the big wigs.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. My husband goes, so basically he's doing the same thing as most of you. I said, what do you mean? Because I always joke and say my day job feeds my belly and gives me the money to do my theater stuff, which feeds my heart and gives me spirit. And he said he's doing the same thing. His day job is feeding his ability to do this great production. I said, yeah, I'm just like Kevin Spacey. Just sort of exactly like, so he should be my friend.
Well, just appreciate that commitment, um, because and we see it with not only speaking, but he puts money behind it.
Yeah.
And what better way to spend money? Well, one, taking people on a yacht is a great way to spend money and
He takes
and
care of
giving
his
that
people. Yeah, he takes care of
takes
his
care of his
people.
people, but
Yeah.
also to put things out there to help us as theater artists and teachers to help, you know, when it's time for me to do, and I've decided this, when it's time for me to do another straight show, it's going to be Shakespeare.
Yay!
And maybe another year or two, because I usually do the musical, and that's fine. But when I do, it's going to be doing Shakespeare. I talked with the other teacher I teach with. I'm like, okay, if you're going to do a musical again, you need to give me a November date. I need more time because we're going to do Shakespeare. I
Good
don't
for
know which
you.
one, but let's make the dive. Come on, let's go explore it, too, because the students need that challenge. I need that challenge. And uh, it'll help pull people out of the woodwork, too. You know, I don't know if that'll be Romeo and Juliet. I don't know if it'll be
Always a good choice.
Midsummer. I don't know if it'll be
Always a good
Midsummer.
choice.
I'm always a little more partial to the comedies.
Midsummer's fun because you can work music into it really easily.
Hmm.
And it's flexible as far as girls and boys, and you've got lots of fairies to play with, and the
Yeah, so
mechanicals are fun. But Romeo and
um,
Juliet's delicious. It really is a great show. Better than you think. Like a lot of people don't get how funny it is. Um,
yes.
it's
Well, we know
hilarious.
definitely first act is a lot of fun. It's
Yeah.
by the time you get the fifth act five, things things
Well, again,
things get a
that
little muddy.
once the characters get what they want, which in this case is married, things go horribly awry. Once a character gets what they want in a tragedy, things go bad. And it's the same in Romeo and Juliet, it's the same in Richard III, it's the same in most of his tragedies. So, and in life, I suppose. So, maybe it's a guess. It's a good thing Kevin Spacey hasn't hired me yet. But maybe my life is a comedy, so getting what I want wouldn't mess me up. Hire me. Yeah.
um, and he's just about to tackle a one-man show the end of March or
And if he
March,
needs help,
May.
I've done those. You could call me, Kevin. I've done
um,
those. I can help you with that.
show called Clarence Darrow that'll be, of course, premiered at the Old Vic, which is a one-man show, and definitely one person shows are a challenge, and I'm sure he will rise to it
Yeah.
oh so well.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but I also appreciate his sense of humor.
Me too.
He's what been on since Jimmy Fallon started. He's been on there twice. He just
The
had a new
barbershop
video.
quartet broke my
The
heart.
barbershop.
I'm so happy.
It was too funny. I think for me at the same time as me, I think he was on
You know,
May
that's a
2nd.
big piece of the film too, is that sense of play being so important.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a big. I love the gift he gives at the end. You should watch it, everybody, so you can see
Yeah.
the gift he gives at the end. It was did made me grin ear to ear with kind of those happy tears tinkling in my eyes. It was great.
Um, were there other things you wanted to touch on
Well,
about the movie?
I guess I would just say I don't think the film is for. Um, it might not be what some people expect. I bet a lot of people are expecting to see all Kevin Spacey and all his prep for Richard III, and maybe it's an acting thing, but it's really not. It's more of a
Yeah.
road documentary, and it's if you're looking for that, go look at Looking for Richard with Al Pacino, and you'll get that. But I love this film. It's a love letter to theater.
Hmm.
I think it gets people excited. If I was starting a theater production, a Shakespearean production, I might have my kids watch it, though it does have some F-bombs. So make sure you watch that.
Word up, Ohio.
Yeah. But I think it's valuable to kind of help argue the value of theater, um, and give a
Yeah, I
sense of
think
what it's like to go on tour.
yeah, I think they give like us a glimpse of the artistic process.
Hmm.
Of course, I just want more of it, and that's okay. I mean,
Right.
and it's, but I think, for those who, I think it's those of us who love theater, it reinforces that. And I think for people who are maybe new or never really thought of it, I think it gives them a great view of the process and the process at its ideal of what it should be, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yep.
Because, of course, there can be bumps in the road, but I think it shows us a sense of, if you have a committed group of artists working together, they can tell a really strong story no matter where they're at. Um, so,
I would
and I
watch
know,
every one of them. If he wants to do this for every show he does, I would watch every one of them. I'm addicted to shows, to documentaries like that. I love to see the behind the scenes stuff. Another great one is the one for Warhorse. If you get a chance to see that one, it's another terrific backstage documentary. Um, just gorgeous. Great show, too. Did you get to see that one?
no, I haven't seen it.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Absolutely stunning. Just stunning, stunning, stunning spectacle.
Yeah, and I think it's it warms my heart when I get to see those shows that show us the production process. That where it's not a competition
Right.
type thing, or not, I'm saying it's not a reality show. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Because yes, there's like guys and divas that show about getting to the thespian festival and Shakespeare High, but it's more about the process of getting there than who won or who didn't, if that
Right.
makes sense. Whereas sometimes you have the reality TV series like how they staged Grease and um, the one that they did for Legally Blonde, which is totally more competition-y, The Voice, that type of thing. But I love seeing the process because one, it reminds me, one, that I'm not alone.
Yep.
And two, oh, people run into that too, okay. And, how they triumph over that. Because most of the time, most people do. And so that's just something always to remember. Um, in our show notes, we put some links to some great stuff by Mr. Spacey. You can the film. You can go to kevinspacey.com, and now the film is or kevinspacey.com/now the film, and download it yourself. Now I'm intrigued to see what the special um, features were. And the proceeds of this go to the Kevin Spacey Foundation, which is all about helping train feature artists. So you got to give him props to sending the elevator back down, which is a quote he's, I think, pulled from Jack Lemmon, who he was able to perform in front of when he was like 10 or 11. And, Jack Lemmon's one of my favorite actors, too, because he had such truth and such an everyman and just such heart. And you think of all the different, comedies and dramas. I remember watching China Syndrome and just the work Jack Lemmon did in that, and
The Out
that
of Towners
passion,
with my
the
mom.
out
I
of
don't think
town,
I've ever laughed that hard. I love Steve Martin, but that Jack Lemmon version is the one.
and the apartment, which is like my second
Yeah.
favorite movie. First one's Casablanca, second one's the apartment, and just the um, working hard and how he falls in love with Shirley MacLaine, and it wasn't one of those Doris Day movies. You saw people actually involved in relationships, and it was a little bit messy, and just the great humor in that, but the truth in it. I love the shut up and deal. And he's like, oh, she's gonna stay with me, or They may have a relationship, so that's just um. So I appreciate the effort that Mr. Spacey has done giving back to the arts, and glad to know that he's there pushing and helping. So I think that'll do it for our show this week. Want to remind all our listeners to become a Patreon member, and you can do that. Go to edreach.us / I'm sorry, patreon.com/edreach. Got that reversed. And help us take education forward by making a monthly donation. Can be even just $1. So check that out.
$1? That's like I could donate to Kevin Spacey Foundation and still have money to donate to Patreon.
Totally. So be sure to think about that. Be sure to join us next week. And as always, have a great week, and we will see you next time.